Let me start with a simple truth that can change your life faster than almost anything else you learn. Most of the things you worry about will never happen. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. And yet, day after day, millions of people allow worry to steal their energy, their focus, their happiness, and their potential. I've spent decades studying success, psychology, productivity, and human performance, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Worry is one of the most destructive habits the human mind can develop. But here's the good news. Just like any habit, worry can be canceled. Not managed, not minimized, canceled. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. But before we go deeper, I want to ask you something very honestly. What do you worry about the most right now? Is it money? Your future? Your career? Your family? Your health? Something you said yesterday? Something that might happen next month? Write it in the comments below. I want you to be honest about it, because the first step to canceling worry is becoming aware of what is actually running through your mind. Now, let me tell you something I learned early in my career that completely changed the way I think about worry. I discovered that worry is simply the misuse of imagination. Think about that for a moment. Your imagination is one of the most powerful tools you possess. It is the same mental ability that allows inventors to create new technologies, entrepreneurs to build, businesses and leaders to envision a better future. But when that same imagination is used in the wrong direction, it becomes worry. Instead of imagining solutions, you imagine problems. Instead of imagining success, you imagine failure. Instead of imagining opportunity, you imagine disaster. And the mind does something very dangerous when it begins imagining negative outcomes. It starts believing they are real. Your heart rate increases, your body tenses, your brain begins searching for evidence that confirms your fear. And suddenly you are living inside a problem that doesn't even exist. One of the most remarkable psychological facts is that the human brain cannot easily distinguish between a vividly imagined event and a real one. So when you repeatedly imagine worst-case scenarios, your body reacts as if those things are already happening. This is why chronic worriers often feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and mentally drained, even when nothing terrible has actually occurred. They are fighting battles that only exist in their imagination. Now, here is something else I want you to understand. Successful people are not people who never face problems. Successful people are people who refuse to waste energy worrying about problems. There's a huge difference. Throughout my life, I've worked with entrepreneurs, executives, millionaires, and world-class performers. These are people responsible for enormous decisions and serious responsibilities. Do you think they never face uncertainty? Of course they do. But they've trained their minds to focus on solutions instead of worries. And that mental discipline is one of the reasons they achieve so much. Let me give you a powerful statistic that researchers discovered when studying worry. Approximately 85% of the things people worry about never happen. Never. And of the remaining 15% that do happen, the majority of people report that they handle the situation better than they expected, which means nearly all worry is unnecessary suffering. You are paying emotional interest on problems that may never arrive. And the tragedy is that while you're worrying, life is passing you by. You can't be fully creative while worrying. You can't think clearly while worrying. You can't make confident decisions while worrying. Worry shrinks your world. It narrows your thinking, robs you of courage. Now I want you to think about something very important. Imagine two people facing the exact same situation. Both of them have financial pressure. Both of them are uncertain about the future. Both of them have challenges ahead. But one person spends hours every day worrying. The other person spends that same time planning solutions. Which person do you think will succeed? The difference is not intelligence. The difference is not luck. The difference is focus. One mind is trapped in worry. The other mind is working on progress. And here's the powerful realization I want you to absorb today. Worry gives you the illusion of control while actually giving you none. People often think that worrying somehow prepares them for problems. But worry does not prepare you. Planning prepares you. Action prepares you. Thinking through solutions prepares you. Worry is simply mental rehearsal of failure. And when you rehearse failure long enough, you begin to feel weak, hesitant, and uncertain. That is why learning how to cancel worries is one of the most valuable mental skills you will ever develop. Let me share with you one of the most important principles I teach in personal development. Your mind can hold only one dominant thought at a time, just one. You cannot simultaneously think a positive thought and a negative thought with equal strength. One will dominate the other. This means you always have a choice about what occupies your mind. You can feed your mind worry, or you can feed your mind solutions. You can feed your mind fear, or you can feed your mind possibility. But whatever you feed your mind consistently becomes your mental reality. I once worked with a young business owner who was constantly worried about losing his company. Every day he imagined competitors destroying his business, customers leaving, the economy collapsing. His worry became so intense that he started making defensive decisions. He stopped investing in marketing. He stopped expanding. He stopped taking calculated risks. And guess what happened? His business actually began declining. Not because his fears were true, but because his worry paralyzed his thinking. Eventually, we worked together to change one habit. Instead of asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" I asked him to replace that question with a different one. What is the best possible thing that could happen? At first, he resisted. His mind was trained to think negatively, but after practicing this question daily, something interesting happened. His creativity returned. He started seeing opportunities again. He began taking smart actions instead of defensive ones. And within a year, his business was growing faster than ever. The circumstances did not change overnight. His thinking did. And when thinking changes, results begin to change. Now let me give you a practical mental shift that can immediately reduce worry in your life. Whenever you catch yourself worrying, pause and ask yourself this simple question. Is this a real problem right now, or is this something that might happen in the future? You will discover something fascinating. Most worries are about imaginary future scenarios. They are not happening now, not today, not this minute. And when you bring your attention back to the present moment, the emotional intensity of worry often disappears. Because right now, in this exact moment, things are usually far more manageable than your imagination predicted. Another important truth I want you to remember is this. Worry is addictive. Yes, addictive. The brain can become conditioned to repeatedly scan for threats and negative possibilities. Over time, this becomes automatic. Your mind begins looking for reasons to worry even when life is relatively stable. That's why breaking the habit requires conscious effort. But the moment you begin replacing worry with deliberate thinking, you start taking back control of your mental energy. And mental energy is one of your most valuable resources. Every hour you spend worrying is an hour you are not investing in growth. Every minute you spend imagining disaster is a minute you are not building your future. Think about the greatest achievers in history. Inventors, leaders, innovators. Do you believe they succeeded because they spent their days worrying? Of course not. They spent their time thinking, building, experimenting, adjusting, and moving forward. Progress and worry cannot occupy the same space for long. One eventually pushes the other out. So here's the idea I want you to consider right now. What if you decided, starting today, that worry is no longer allowed to dominate your thinking? What if every time your mind starts drifting into worry, you deliberately redirect it towards solutions, actions, or possibilities? That single decision could change the entire trajectory of your life. And the good news is that canceling worry is not about becoming unrealistic or ignoring problems. It's about becoming mentally disciplined. It's about directing your thinking toward things that actually improve your situation. Because worry has never solved a single problem in human history. But clear thinking and decisive action have solved millions. In the next part, I'm going to show you several powerful techniques that you can begin using immediately to cancel worries before they grow stronger. These techniques are simple, but they are incredibly effective when practiced consistently. And once you understand them, you'll realize something that most people never discover. You have far more control over your mind than you were ever taught. But before we continue, take a moment and tell me this in the comments. What is one worry you are ready to let go of starting today? Sometimes just naming it is the first step toward canceling it. Now let me show you something extremely powerful about the way your mind works. Worry grows in the dark. It feeds on vagueness, uncertainty, and unanswered questions. The less clear a situation is, the more room your imagination has to create fear. And when fear grows, worry multiplies. But the moment you bring clarity to a situation, worry begins to shrink. One of the most effective techniques I have ever used and taught to thousands of people is incredibly simple. Write the problem down. That's it. Take a piece of paper and clearly describe what you are worried about. Most people never do this. They carry their worries around in their heads where they remain vague and overwhelming. But when you force yourself to put the worry into clear words, something remarkable happens. The problem suddenly becomes smaller. It becomes more specific. And once a problem becomes specific, it becomes solvable. I've seen people walk into my seminars feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and mentally exhausted. They believed their problems were enormous and impossible to solve. But when I asked them to write down exactly what they were worried about, many of them discovered that their worry was actually about one or two specific issues that could be addressed with a plan. Clarity dissolves anxiety. So the first practical technique to cancel worry is this: define the problem clearly. Ask yourself, what exactly am I worried about? Specifically. The second step is just as important. Ask yourself, what is the worst possible thing that could happen? Now this might sound uncomfortable, but it is incredibly liberating. When people worry, they often avoid thinking about the worst case scenario. Their mind circles around it without ever confronting it directly, and because it remains undefined, it feels terrifying. But when you clearly identify the worst possible outcome, you take away its mysterious power. For example, someone might worry constantly about losing their job. But when they actually define the worst case scenario, they realize it might look something like this. If I lose my job, I will need to find another source of income within a few months. Suddenly, the situation becomes something practical rather than catastrophic. And once you define the worst case, the next question becomes incredibly empowering. Can I survive this? In almost every situation, the answer is yes. Human beings are far more resilient than they realize. We adapt, we learn, we recover, and we move forward. One of the great discoveries of psychology is that people tend to overestimate how bad future problems will feel and underestimate their own ability to handle them. Your mind exaggerates danger, but your strength is greater than your imagination allows you to believe. The next step is even more important. Once you identify the worst possible outcome, decide what you would do if it actually happened. Create a simple plan. Now, something fascinating happens in your brain when you do this. The moment you create a plan, your mind shifts from fear mode into problem-solving mode. Your brain stops asking what if and starts asking what next. And that shift changes everything, because planning restores a sense of control. When you feel in control even, partially your level of worry drops dramatically. Let me tell you about a man I once worked with who was losing sleep every night worrying about a major financial decision. He imagined losing money, disappointing his family, and damaging his reputation. His mind was creating dozens of negative scenarios. So I asked him to do something simple. I said, let's define the worst possible outcome. After thinking about it carefully, he said the worst case would be losing a certain amount of money if the decision didn't work out. Then I asked him the next question. If that happened, what would you do? Within a few minutes, he realized he could recover financially within a year by adjusting his spending and focusing on new opportunities. And the moment he realized that, his worry disappeared. The situation hadn't changed, but his mental relationship with the problem had changed. He had turned an unknown fear into a defined challenge. And the mind handles challenges far better than it handles vague threats. Another powerful technique to cancel worries is to set a worry deadline. Most people allow worry to run through their minds all day long. Morning, afternoon, evening, and sometimes all night. But you can train your mind to contain it. When a worry appears, tell yourself something like this: I will think about this at 6 p.m. for 15 minutes. Then return your focus to whatever you were doing. When the scheduled time arrives, sit down and think about the problem intentionally. Analyze it, write ideas, consider solutions. And after the time is over, move on. What you will discover is that many worries lose their emotional charge when they are scheduled rather than allowed to dominate your day. You become the manager of your thoughts instead of the victim of them. Another strategy I strongly recommend is what I call action therapy. The fastest way to eliminate worry is to take action in the direction of a solution. Even small action reduces anxiety. Think about this. When people worry about their health, they feel helpless. But the moment they begin exercising, improving their nutrition, or visiting a professional for guidance, their emotional state improves. Why? Because action replaces helplessness with progress. When people worry about money, they feel trapped. But the moment they begin learning new skills, improving their productivity, or exploring additional opportunities, their confidence increases. Action creates momentum, and momentum destroys worry. One of the most powerful habits you can build is asking yourself this question whenever you feel anxious. What is the very next step I can take? Not the entire solution, just the next step. Send the email, make the call, research the information, create the plan. Small steps generate forward movement, and forward movement reduces fear. There is also something very important I want you to understand about worry. Worry focuses your attention on what you cannot control. But successful people focus their attention on what they can control. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control other people's decisions. You cannot control unexpected events. But you can control your preparation. You can control your habits. You can control your learning. You can control the actions you take today. And when you concentrate on those areas, your confidence grows because you are investing energy where it actually matters. Another mental habit that cancels worry is gratitude. Now, some people underestimate this idea, but it is one of the most powerful psychological shifts available. When your mind is focused on what is going wrong, worry expands. But when your mind intentionally focuses on what is going right, your emotional state changes. Gratitude reminds you that life is larger than your current concern. It reminds you that progress already exists. And it balances the brain's natural tendency to look for threats. Every evening, I recommend taking a few minutes to think about 3 things that went well that day. They don't have to be dramatic. It might be a productive conversation, a problem solved, a moment of progress. But this simple habit trains your mind to see stability and opportunity rather than constant danger. And when your brain learns to notice positive experiences, the intensity of worry begins to fade. There's another important truth I want you to consider. Worry often comes from trying to control the uncontrollable future. But life is always contained. Uncertainty, always. Every generation in history has faced unknown challenges, economic shifts, technological change, personal setbacks, unexpected opportunities. The future has never been guaranteed, and yet humanity continues to progress. People adapt, they learn, they innovate, and they overcome. When you understand this historical perspective, you realize something comforting. Uncertainty is not a sign that something is wrong. It is simply part of life. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. The goal is to develop the mental strength to move forward despite it. Because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to act anyway. And every time you act in the presence of uncertainty, your confidence grows. Your mind begins to learn that progress is possible even when the path is not perfectly clear. In the final part, I'm going to show you the deeper mindset shift that completely transforms your relationship with worry. It's a way of thinking that many highly successful people naturally develop, and once you understand it, you'll see problems and worries from a completely different perspective. But before we move on, I want you to reflect on something. Which of these techniques do you think could help you the most right now? Writing the worry down, defining the worst-case scenario, taking immediate action, or focusing on what you can control? Tell me in the comments. Your answer might help someone else realize they're not alone in what they're facing. And sometimes that realization alone can begin to cancel a great deal of unnecessary worry. Now let me share with you the deeper shift that completely changes the way you deal with worry for the rest of your life. It's a simple idea, but it has extraordinary power. You must begin to see problems differently. Most people see problems as threats. They see them as interruptions, obstacles, and unfair burdens placed in their path. And because they interpret problems this way, they're immediate. Reaction is stress, frustration, and worry. But highly successful people learn to look at problems in a completely different way. They see problems as opportunities in disguise. Every major advancement in business, science, technology, and personal achievement began as a problem someone decided to solve. Every successful company exists because it solves a problem for customers. Every career grows because someone becomes better at solving problems than the average person. In fact, your level of success in life will almost always be determined by the size and complexity of the problems you are capable of solving. This means something very interesting. Problems are not your enemy. Problems are your opportunity for growth. Once you truly understand this, worry begins to lose its power. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking a far more productive question. What can I learn from this? Or even better, how can this situation make me stronger? Now I want you to Think back to the biggest challenges you faced in your life. Maybe it was a failure. Maybe it was a rejection. Maybe it was a difficult period financially or emotionally. At the time, it probably felt overwhelming. You may have worried constantly about what would happen next, but look at it now. Chances are that experience forced you to grow. It made you more resourceful, more resilient, more capable. Many people eventually realize that the very experiences they once worried about became the experiences that strengthened them the most. Life has a remarkable way of doing that. What feels like a setback today often becomes the foundation for a breakthrough tomorrow. But you can only see that clearly when you stop letting worry dominate your thinking. Another important realization is this: worry is always about the future. Always. You never worry about the past in the same way. The past may bring regret or disappointment, but worry specifically lives in imagined future scenarios. And the future, by its very nature, is uncertain, which means if you allow your mind to constantly project negative possibilities into the future, you will always find something to worry about. There will always be another what if. What if the economy changes? What if things don't work out? What if something unexpected happens? But the opposite is also true. What if things work out better than you expect? What if new opportunities appear? What if the challenge you're facing leads you toward something even greater? Both possibilities exist. Yet most people train their minds to focus only on the negative one. Canceling worry means consciously choosing a different mental direction. Now let me give you a habit that can transform the way you approach uncertainty. Whenever something unexpected happens, train yourself to ask this question: what's the good in this situation? At first, your mind may resist the question, but every situation contains something useful. Maybe it teaches you a new skill. Maybe it forces you to develop patience. Maybe it redirects you toward a better opportunity. When you search for the lesson or the advantage, your brain begins looking for solutions instead of reasons to worry. And the more you practice this habit, the faster your mind shifts into constructive thinking. Let me also share something extremely practical. Protect your mental environment. Your mind is heavily influenced by the information you consume and the people you spend time with. If you constantly surround yourself with negative conversations, fear-driven news, and pessimistic opinions, your mind will naturally absorb those attitudes. Worry spreads easily in negative environments, but the opposite is also true. When you surround yourself with positive thinkers, problem solvers, and action-oriented people, your mindset becomes stronger. You begin seeing possibilities where others see limitations. You begin thinking about solutions instead of dwelling on fears. How environment quietly shapes your thinking every day, so choose it carefully. Another powerful way to cancel worry is to build confidence through preparation. Confidence is not something that appears magically. It is built through repeated action and improvement. When you improve your skills, increase your knowledge, and strengthen your habits, you become more capable of handling whatever life presents. And when you feel capable, worry loses its grip. For example, someone who continuously improves. Their professional skills feels far less worried about job security. Someone who manages their finances wisely feels less worried about money. Someone who invests in their health feels more confident about their future. Preparation creates peace of mind. It gives you the quiet assurance that whatever happens, you have the ability to respond effectively. And remember this powerful truth: your mind will always try to move in the direction you train it to move. If you repeatedly practice worry, you may find it difficult to shake off. Your brain becomes efficient at worrying. But if you repeatedly practice problem solving, optimism, and action, your brain becomes efficient at those things instead. You are literally training your thinking patterns every day. So ask yourself honestly, what mental habit am I strengthening? Am I strengthening worry, or am I strengthening courage, clarity, and progress? The choice happens in small moments throughout the day. When a challenge appears, you have two options. You can feed the worry, or you can feed the solution. And every time you choose the solution, you weaken the habit of worry just a little more. Over time, that small shift becomes a completely different mindset. I want to leave you with a final thought that has helped countless people reclaim their mental peace. Imagine that your mind is like a garden. If you allow weeds to grow freely, they will eventually take over. Worry, fear, and doubt are mental weeds. If they are not managed, they spread quickly. But the good news is that you have the ability to plant different seeds. Seeds of confidence, seeds of optimism, seeds of action and purpose. And when you intentionally cultivate those seeds every day, the weeds of worry begin to lose space to grow. Your mind becomes a place of strength rather than stress. So starting today, I want you to make a simple commitment to yourself. Whenever you notice worry appearing in your thoughts, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this something I can act on right now? If the answer is yes, take the next step immediately. If the answer is no, release it and return your focus to something productive. Because your energy is far too valuable to spend on imaginary problems. Your life is far too important to be controlled by unnecessary fear. And your future is far too full of possibility to be limited by worry. The truth is, canceling worry is not about pretending life will always be easy. Life will always contain challenges. But challenges are not the same as helplessness. When you develop the discipline to direct your thoughts towards solutions, growth, and action, you become stronger than the worries that once held you back. And once you reach that point, something incredible happens. You stop fearing the future. You start building it. If this message helped you see worry in a new way, I want you to write one word in the comments right now. Control. Because the moment you realize you can direct your thoughts, you begin taking control of your life. And if you know someone who constantly struggles with worry, share this video with them. Sometimes the right idea at the right moment can completely change the direction of someone's thinking. And it might just help them cancel worries they've been carrying for far too long.